So today's topic, we have Humberto Blanco, who is a professor with the soil management and applied physics, soil physics here at University of Nebraska, and he's going to talk to us about how research says, or what research says about strategic tilling in long-term no-till systems. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Humberto.
Thank you for having me today. I'm a soils guy, so all what I do is about finding ways to manage our soils better. So we do know that managing soil is not that simple, right? I teach class soil management, and the first class I say, oh, okay, managing soils is going to be like managing people, okay? Which is not that easy. Great, but okay, so I'm going to talk about occasional tillage. Okay, so no-till farming, right? It's I would say it's the greatest discovery, right? Right? Can you, next slide, please? Yeah, you see, so I mean, no-till benefits are many, right? We all know that was created to reduce erosion, conserve water and water-limited regions. It improves soil properties, especially near the surface. It can improve yields in rain-fed systems, right? Especially in the Great Plains. Obviously, reduces labor, right? And all the benefits, right? But there might be some specific, site-specific challenges, right? What about those weeds, kochia, and other weeds that I found when I was working in Kansas, for example, and in the Great Plains, we do have some weeds that we cannot get rid of with the herbicides, and right? What about some stratification in some no-till soils, right? Like pH stratification of carbon, and what about pH is low and near the surface because we use generous amounts of fertilizer, and that can acidify soil in some cases. What about compaction, right? What about runoff? I mean, no-till soils, if compacted, could increase runoff losses in some cases, right? Next, please. Okay, so is no-till system a simple practice? Is it a fixed system? I think we all agree that uh, some old management practices need some evaluation, right? Adjustments are part of our life. So, I mean, no-till, occasional tillage could be part of such an adjustment, right? Next, please. Okay, we do have a good number of tools to manage no-till, right? Okay, we need to cover the soil. There you go. We need to add animal manure, or let's add cover crops, or let's bring animals where they used to be. Add perennials, right? Or, prairie strips. Let's diversify our crops. But would the occasional tillage be one more tool in our toolbox? If yes, I'm all for it, right? As long as it improves our no-till fields. Next. So what is occasional tillage? Well, is Blanco here to say that we can till this no-till fields every other year? Nope. Every 2 years? Nope. Occasional tillage, what we're referring is to there is no fixed number of years, let's say 20 or 30, but I would say based on published, um, papers that may once in 5 years or 10 years, that's it. Once in 5 or 10 years. Once in 10 years would be great. It's not reduced tillage. It's not like every year or even the same year, just a shallow tillage, right? It is once in 10 years or maybe once in 5 years. Next. And these are the potential benefits that one may expect, right? I say, okay, I have those challenges in my no-till field, right? It can maybe control weeds, break those compacted layers. What about incorporating lime, biochar, manure, right? One-time incorporation. If I are using like biochar or manure, you don't want to spread that on the the surface of no-till soils, we lose a lot, right? To runoff, to wind. What about, you know, incorporating those amendments with occasional tillage? What about we have in some cases like continuous no-till, maybe a little bit too much residue? Okay, if we are not grazing, or, right? Maybe occasional tillage can help. Okay, and then managing a stratification, right? Again, I've seen no-till fields where pH is like 5 compared to plowed field where the pH is 6, so 6.5 in some cases, right? Okay, and the same thing with peat tends to accumulate near the surface. Next. Okay, this is what I heard and some colleagues say, like, why not use occasional tillage, right? Why not improve the unimproved layer? Let's flip like pancake, right? Because in some cases, no-till improves soil properties only near the surface, right? Why not improve the lower layers then? So before OT, we have high carbon right near the surface and low carbon layer below, right? And then after OT, this is theoretical, right? View, it says, okay, on top now we have low carbon layer. Okay, now we can accumulate carbon, can improve that low carbon layer, right? Next. But there are some questions out there. Well, Blanco, are you saying that we will just get rid of all the great benefits from our long-term no-till systems? Well, we need to look at that carefully, right? What does research really say about OT? Do we have even enough research data? Does our personal opinion, differ from research information? And sometimes, humans tend to do that. Say, well, how can you touch this no-till soil? I mean, it's a sacrilege. Is it a sacrilege, right? Let's see, right? Next. Okay, we have a few studies from Nebraska. I mean, it's been done, maybe they were conducted not recently, but from maybe 10, 20 years. Next. Okay, so this table is busy, but it gives us some idea. You see, the first study was conducted by Tim Kittler and his team in 2000. It was done in Sydney, Nebraska, right, in western Nebraska. And then they used moldwork plow. After 22 years of no-till, they plowed down to 6 inches. How often? Once. One-time thing. It reduced wheat population in year one. Okay. Yeah, obviously, it's that system had wheat, as it is in most cropping systems in the region. Okay, it increased yield by 11 bushels per acre in year one, and then about 7 bushels per acre year three, and then a little bit in year five. What about soil properties? They measured after 5 years. Oops, bulk density increased. Interesting. pH increased. What about carbon? Does it really alleviate the stratification? It reduced, it seems that it flipped a bit, right? It reduced stratification. It reduced carbon in the upper 3 inches and it increased in 3 to 6. But then if you look at for the 0 to 12 inches, there was nothing there. Then Charlie Wortman have been using his data quite a bit because we looked at a good number of parameters in 2010, and I think he started in 2007, I think. So he used a good number of tillage tools there: moldwork plow, mini moldwork plow, chisel, and 7 and 11 year no-till, and he did only once, right? There was, in general, on a yearly basis, there was no effect on crop yields, but tended to reduce the stratification. But I don't think that's something that I'm going to mention later. But I don't think he used a system that was a no-till system that was highly stratified, right? I mean, but they also found, okay, it reduced microbial biomass, okay, but not other soil properties. And recently, I'm in Sydney, Nebraska again. All what Cody Cluj and others have a paper in press. So they looked at they use moldwork plow. And then this is kind of interesting. They used moldwork plow as occasional tillage rate every 6 years, right, for a good number of years, and then there was no effect on organic carbon or labile carbon is epoxy, right, and then soil respiration. Next. What about other studies in other states and countries? Next, please. Okay, so this is, oops, a lot of data. Well, all what I want to say is, okay, there are many studies out there, but I looked at the last 5 years, okay? Recent studies. Studies here on the very left, you can see in Australia, been a lot of work done, China and US, and other parts of the world. What have they found? I mean, obviously, the systems are different, there are soils are a bit different, and there's different tillage systems. But in general, when it comes to compaction, oops, it seems, yeah, it can reduce and yeah, it can reduce in some cases, yes. And what happened? At the bottom, it says no effect in a good number of studies. Well, depends when they measured as well. What about if they measured immediately after using occasional tillage? Yeah, there would be a reduction in compaction, right? And compaction parameters, we're talking about bulk density, penetration resistance. What about if they measure 1 year after, right? So it seems, yeah, it can, right? Reduce soil compaction, but not always. Next. And then what about other soil health indicators, like wet aggregate stability, even water content, and what about, biological properties? Again, last 5 year data is a busy table, but what about that column in red? When it comes to aggregate stability, it says no effect in 2 studies, and decreased in a couple of studies, increased, it's mixed, right? I liked a couple of them that they were done here in Kansas with Agustino Burr, and so it's a no effect. And others as well. What about soil water content? I mean, if you are gonna, uh, uh, plow the soil, you're gonna use a lot of moisture. Well, that's what some people may say. Well, I was a little bit surprised when I saw this many years ago. No effect, no effect, right? In most cases. And then what about microbial properties or biological properties at the end? No effect really. We're looking at this last 5 year data. Although studies are not that many, right? Only three. Next. Okay, what about carbon accumulation? Is it going to increase? Is it going to really flip this soil like pancake and accumulate a lot of carbon? In most cases, no effect, right? In most cases, I see a lot of no effects there. Then reduced in one case in Australia, but recovered in 2 years. Reduced and on a study in Turkey and increased. I like the one at the bottom, again, the spread is like no effect in the upper layer, right? Then it kind of increased. It's in that flip there, but right? But if you do, like 0 to 30 centimeter depth, there might be no differences because we are just flipping, right? So the cumulative effect may not be there, right? Okay, so it seems there is not much going on there. In most cases, occasional tillage does not accumulate more carbon. Next. Okay, the last busy one. Okay, what about yields? Is it going to increase yields? Okay, again, data from last 5 years and data from Brazil, USA, Australia, and other parts of the world. In most cases, no effect, right? But it increased in a couple of cases, but in most cases, no effect. Next. Okay, what about all the studies? Why not just look at all what's available so far? Next, please. Here you go. This is a summary of all the studies that are available. I think I mean, we wrote a review paper many years ago, but so that's why I reviewed the data from last 5 years. But what about if we look at just all the studies? So in summary, it seems, yeah, it can reduce penetration resistance if we generalize, okay? Bulk density, highly variable parameter. So bulk density, it seems that, yeah, it can reduce 50% of cases or so. Runoff, yeah, doesn't always increase because that's a concern, right? You are going to increase runoff if you disturb the soil. What? Not really. You might be increasing infiltration as well by disturbing, but that might be temporary, right? So sediment loss can increase. There is a risk there, right? That's the blue one. What about dissolved P? Yeah, it can reduce, and this is near the surface, right? So it's in the dissolved P is reduced a bit, but not always. What about wet aggregate stability? It seems kind of mixed, but does not always reduce the wet aggregate stability. What about soil water? As I mentioned earlier, no effect in most cases, right? What about carbon? Again, no effect in most cases, right? Soil pH, interesting. I mean, no effect in most cases too, right? Yellow portion of that graph. And then biology, again, no effect. What about wheat density, wheat population? It seems, yeah, it can reduce in most cases, right? What about yields? The last bar there, no effect about, say, in 50% of cases. And then it increased maybe in a few cases, and then mixed. Well, what does mixed mean? Well, it increases in one year and not in the other, or depends on the crop and things like that. So next. Okay, does OT reduce the stratification of nutrients? I would say it can. Well, depends how stratified your no-till system is. I mean, in some cases, no-till is working great. So why do we have to talk about occasional tillage, right? If it's highly stratified no-till system, then probably OT may help. And also depends on the equipment, right? I mean, if you're just using disc, it's going to just scratch the surface, and then it's not going to reduce the stratification. So I have to think if it's a highly stratified system, then probably we have to talk about more work plow, right? Next. Okay, then Charlie Wortman here in that paper that I mentioned earlier, he looked at carbon and pH stratification. And then, yeah, so for the top graph is about the organic matter content, right? And the upper 1 inch, yeah, no-till, yeah, higher than, yeah, then 2 to 4 inches. Yeah, it seems that actually the plowed one, right? They increased a bit, it flipped, but not really. Look at the P at the bottom graph. Yeah, no-till had higher, right? The tallest bar there. But then plow did not really, increase at the bottom the same extent, right? So it seems it helped a bit, but not much. Next. Okay, so an example of pH stratification from data from Australia kind of sounds interesting. That shows interesting trend here. The no-till is the green one, and the occasional is the red one. Look at that. The no-till hasn't been touched, right? So it's the pH is like 6.2 on the surface, and then it decreases quickly to 4.5. But then if you use occasional tillage, that's the red one, you kind of uniformly distribute pH, right? And I don't have a data, the opposite, where no-till would have a lower pH, right, near the surface, then the opposite probably would happen, right? That if you have stratified stratification of pH, though, but hopefully OT will mix that and, right, and increase pH. Next. Okay, well, the case of pH is interesting. I mean, if it increases in topsoil pH, that would be beneficial in acidic soil, right? But what about in semi-arid regions? Well, in that case, you want to reduce topsoil pH. So if the subsoil has low pH, that would be beneficial, right? It can bring up the layer with low pH, right? Next. Okay, what about economics? Are we going to make money by using occasional tillage? Well, it's kind of mixed there. Slightly increased. A study from Kansas. And France said, okay, increased gross margin. Australia said increased. What about the bottom one? If it doesn't increase crop yield, how is it going to increase yield, right? So not profitable probably, but it's kind of mixed. If it increases crop yield, it can increase profits, in some cases. Next. Well, this is what we know, right? I mean, if we talk about soil health or soil properties, no-till beats a conventional tillage. We know that it's better than conventional tillage. But what about reduced tillage? No-till can be better than reduced till or equal in some cases. But where does OT or occasional tillage fit? Would be between what? Between no-till and conventional tillage. But in some cases, data show that it doesn't matter, as I mentioned, right? It seems no-till is equal to occasional tillage. Although in a few cases, it could degrade, but that's not, in general, occasional tillage is not going to degrade the soil based on the data available to this point, right? Next. Okay, this is a busy one. We need to consider factors, right? We cannot just say use of use occasional tillage to alleviate any issues. Well, it depends on the tillage method you're going to use, frequency of tillage, what's the soil texture, soil slope, organic matter content, and climate, companion practices. They have cover crops, so other practices, right? Cropping system, tillage depth. If it's, for example, a stratification, then probably if the problem of stratification with no till, probably you need to use dip tillage maybe once in 10 years, maybe to alleviate that, right? What about timing? Should we do this in fall or spring, right? Yeah, next. Okay. This is the big one. How long do the benefits of OT last, right? When it comes to stratification, I mean, obviously that would last longer, maybe 4 to 5 years. When it comes to alleviation of compaction, data show that maybe you need to repeat this every 2, 3 years, which is too often for me. So it's not that great when it comes to compaction alleviation. What about weeds? Again, 2 to 3 years, right? And it's not general. It's not, and in some cases, it might not really control, right? Even a weed population. It's, I mean, in most cases it does, but in a few cases it, it may not. Okay, next. Okay. Again, going back to how long did the benefits of, OT last? Research data show from Kansas and Nebraska show that, okay, in year 1, it's kind of expected, it controlled. But in year 2, after year 1, well, not really. Variable or no effect, right? In a few cases, sometimes even seeds may, OT may bring seeds to the surface in a few cases, right? But it seems in general, benefits are short-lived, right? Next. What about the negative effects, if any? Right? I mean, there has to be some negative effect, one may say. Yeah, in a few cases, yeah. But it can reduce wet aggregate stability. But such negative effects are also short-lived. They usually recover, right? Depends on how you manage the system after occasional tillage. Sometimes the negative effects on, for example, on wet aggregate stability can be deeper in the first year, right? And then shallower, so then recover to pre-disturbance levels in 1 or 2 years. Next. How often should I use? Again, this is what based on research data. If you really have to use OT, maybe once in 5 or 10 years. But I just mentioned the short-lived effect, though, right? It lasts only 2 years, 3 years. So do we have to then use occasional tillage every 2 years, every 3 years? I don't think so, right? Maybe, I mean, occasional tillage can be used every 4 or 5 years, like extended rotations at the pre-practice, right? But definitely we need more data to establish the return period, right? So we need more data that were from problem soils, right? For no-till really shows some challenges, right? We cannot just use occasional tillage in all no-till farms, right? Next. Okay, well, what about tools? The tools that we use. Well, the impact of OT will depend on the tillage, on the soil disturbance, right? What is your goal? If the goal is to really bury seeds or reduce the stratification, then inversion tillage probably should be your choice, right? But there is a trade-off there, right? If you use inversion tillage, you are going to disturb the soil, right? They're going to disturb soil more than shallow tillage. So I need to keep that in mind. Next. Well, when should I do this? In fall or spring? Well, depends on the soil condition, depends on the weather, right? And do you think you can put companion practices immediately? Because you don't want to just perform OT and then it rains or it snows, and then you're going to lose a lot of soil, right? So again, depends on again on the weather conditions. Yeah, and the companion practices that you will use with OT. Next. Okay, so a couple more slides here. Okay, Blanco is not here to say today that OT is fine. Use in all no-till farms. Nope. We need to consider soil resiliency. It's the same as as humans. Does everybody need a minor surgery? Does everybody need, pills? No. Some of us need more than others, right? Please, we should not be thinking about using occasional tillage in erosion-prone soils. Look at the one in the picture. That soil is bleeding. We shouldn't be using occasional tillage in shallow and sandy soils, low carbon soils, low residue input systems, right? So we need to think about resilience. Soils that are resilient and high organic matter content maybe can be candidates for occasional tillage. Next. Okay, I mean, we don't want to be using occasional tillage because someone else is using. I mean, we really need to think about other options, like biological options, right? We need to really exhaust other options. Next. What are those options? There are a good number of them, right? Control traffic if you have problems with, if you have issues with the compaction. May be easier said than done. At large scale farming, I mean, control traffic may not be easier to adopt, although some have been successful. Well, if you cannot use a control traffic, what about cover crops? Right? What about those top-rooted cover crops? What about diversifying your rotations? Oh, I have a little bit too much residue. Well, why not use the strip till instead to manage heavy residue accumulation, maybe, right? That would be a better alternative than occasional tillage. The strip till probably can also help with compaction and obviously integrate with management. Then the last one, we really need to think about, I mean, that's some farmers and no-till farmers have been doing a great job. That's the combining practices, right? Using more than one conservation practice to manage all the challenges we have with no-till. What about control traffic? What about cover crops, diversified systems? There you go. So you might not need occasional tillage, right? Next. There you go. So it seems occasional tillage, based on the research information available to this point, it can, yeah, I use that word can, ameliorate compaction and weed population and stratification, but benefits, it seems, do not last very long. I mean, especially with compaction and weeds, I'm concerned. I mean, maybe 2 years, 3 years. The stratification probably, can last, but are all the no-till fields stratified? Maybe not, right? What about yields? It may or may not increase yields. So if it doesn't increase yields, then there are no profits then, right? Okay. Okay, what do you recommend then? I would say, well, occasional tillage could have a place in our no-till fields if those till fields have a lot of challenges. And another if control traffic and other practices do not solve, right, the challenges, then we can think about occasional tillage. We really need to consider, the field in question. I mean, most of the available studies did not really use no-till fields for problems. Some did. A lot of, fields were like, herbicide-resistant weeds, and then, yeah, it worked. But you cannot just perform occasional tillage in any field, right? It took many years to build the soil, health and others. We have to be very careful, right, in considering occasional tillage. But again, we still need more data specifically from no-till fields which really show a problem. What problem would that be? Well, acidification, pH stratification, carbon stratification, right? Or compaction. And then if you cannot address those issues with the practices that I mentioned earlier, then we may consider occasional tillage. But occasional tillage should be the last option, right? So that's what the research data shows so far. I mean, is it negative? Is it going to really erase all the benefits? It seems not really. But so why use if it's not increasing yields, right? So if it's not increasing yields, or if it's not improving soil properties, the first slide the question was, does occasional tillage enhance no-till farming? Well, it seems it could in some cases, but not in some other cases, right? So, yeah, that's all what I had. So, thanks.
Thanks, Humberto. We will open up for questions now, and I'm going to go ahead and turn your slides to off so that I can actually see said questions. One that came to mind for me uh, was you mentioned moldboard plow. Would you choose different tillage based on the different scenarios? So, like if we were dealing with soil stratification, could does shallower tillage work? It doesn't,
Mhm,
correct? You would
mhm,
need
yeah.
something deeper. So the type of tillage for this occasional tillage may depend on the problem you're trying to solve, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. That's what I've been saying in some cases. Occasional tillage could be considered even like a surgery, right? So, why
Hmm.
is that? That seems a little bit drastic, too drastic. Well, if you really want to fix the problem of like a stratification, but you need to use small work plow. Well, but we don't want to be using more work plow very often, right? I mean, once in 10 years might be okay based on some studies, right? So, yep, yep. So if you just, let's say if you want to maybe, just kill weeds, right? So that you can scratch the surface and that will kill, but it's not going to bury the seeds, right? So more work plow could be an option to bury seeds, and but it really has to flip. Does it really flip the soil? I haven't seen that. Similar that it flips maybe just 50%, and it's still, and the survey is not nice to have a system that really flips that soil, right? And that might be, better to reduce the stratification.
Yeah, you mentioned the weeds, and I do see there's a question in the chat box, and I will get to it. But while I'm on this topic, when you're mentioning the weeds, has any research been done on occasional tillage, the weeds, like if they went back 10 years later, if they had buried the seed, they went
Mhm.
back 10 years later and tried to do it again, does that
Mhm.
bring the old stuff back up on the surface and now we're back in the same predicament?
Uh,
Has that research been done?
yeah, no, no, that's a great question. I mean, that paper by Tim Kettler, in Western Nebraska, I mean, monitored that for up to 5 years, and but it was just one-time thing, right? One-time tillage, not repeated cycles. That's what we also need. Let's say occasional tillage every 5 years, right? For let's say for 50 years, occasional tillage every 10 years for 50 years, right? That's five. It's going to happen 5 times, right? So we don't
Yeah.
have that type of data really. I mean, it's been done in a few cases in other parts of the world that may differ from this environment, right? So not many data when it comes to that.
Yeah. Need a really good funding source for that long-term data, right?
Yep, yep. And waiting for the RFPs may apply, to something, but because there is interest in this, and Blanco has been trying to. But I've been following literature, and I'm sharing what I've read and what we have, seen, yeah, in some of our experiments, although not specifically with occasional tillage. So.
Okay. Namir is asking if occasional tillage can have beneficial effects on soil properties, why isn't it having a positive effect on the yield? What is potentially being lost in translation?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, doesn't as I mentioned, in some cases it can improve yield. I mean, soil properties, right? Which one? I mean, maybe like it reduces pH stratification, right? But it does not increase carbon. Why would it increase carbon? I mean, it's just flipping, right? Right? So it's not going to increase. So I mean, it's not going to really. What would be the mechanism for increasing yield? Okay, one of the mechanisms would be by reducing compaction, right? So that could help. I mean, if the compaction was really, really a problem, right? And then what about weeds, right? If the weed issue was really suppressing weeds, right, and there continues no-till, then if you used one-time tillage, that can improve, right? So we really need to look at those yield limiting, factors, maybe weeds or compaction, right? But if it, yeah, but and it does not really improve soil properties. Is it going to improve soil health? Not really. That in general.
Yeah, what I was seeing was sort of no effect, more than improving those
Yeah,
things.
exactly. So
Yeah.
why would one do occasional tillage? I would say don't use occasional tillage. No, I would still say this could be a tool in some cases and site-specific cases, but we really need to identify those no-till fields with major issues, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just a tool in the toolbox, not
Yep,
the tool that you go for everything.
exactly.
Mercedes asks, in this information sh that you shared, it focused on phosphorus and pH. Would you suggest that potassium would be the same as P, that stratification could be improved with that?
Yeah, I think so. I don't have my own data, or I haven't seen that much data on potassium, but yeah, I mean, P is not as mobile as, as nitrates or potassium. So, occasional tillage usually works, better for phosphorus. So potassium is in kind of between, right? So then, yeah, it would have a similar effect, but again, not a lot of data on that.
Yeah. And then the last question that I see so far is from Brandon. Is there any good research on the efficacy of certain fertilizers that are tilled in versus not tilled in at the time of application? And he gives lime as an example.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, I have not seen that. I mean, I mentioned that occasional tillage would be a uh, good way I mean, good practice during one-time incorporation, right, of amendments, right, like biochar or manure or lime. But I think in Australia, I mean, I would be happy to find some articles or interested, but I haven't found any data from our region now where what they combined with the different lime rates or things like that. So it's mostly like occasional tillage. That's it by itself. I mean, what about even combining occasional tillage with cover crops and things like that? So, I mean, that's missing.